All right, what's up, my brothers? So in this video, I want to provide you 5 very, very useful tips which will help you understand women and female nature a little bit better. These are all going to be evergreen. These will be true 100 years from now, and they would have been true 100 or even 1,000 years back in time. All right, so the first one is, number 1, is women aren't sugar and spice and all things nice. As a kid growing up, nursery rhymes, stories, everything that we heard, even if it was on television, there was always some underlying theme, and the language is even used a lot in England, you know, from my dad's side of the family, where they would say sugar and spice and all things nice. And women aren't sugar and spice and all things nice. I'm going to offer a slightly different angle on it. And again, this has been true for a long time and will continue to be true well in the future. Women have some very uncomfortable behaviors and truths, and the way that they respond to men really turn off a lot of guys, you know, if I'm being honest. There's a lot of guys in the Evo psych space that when they write a book and they publish it, they often preface it with like, look, I'm going to tell you some stuff in this book that's really going to rattle your cage. And the first thing that you got to get out of your head as a guy is women aren't sugar and spice and all things nice. A friend of mine once said, if you're handling a gun, you've got to treat all guns as loaded. When you take a firearm course, it's probably one of the first things that they teach you in a firearm safety course is you don't want to point a gun at anybody. You know, you want to handle everything all the time as dangerous. And that's kind of how you have to deal with women. It's an unfortunate consequence of their nature and their sexual strategy, because their strategy competes with our strategy, which I'll explain in a few more of these other points. But at the end of the day, they aren't to be worshipped. They aren't to be put up on a pedestal. They will always be protected, and they will always be preferred by strong, virtuous, heterosexual men with high testosterone levels, because beautiful women are valuable. They've been valuable throughout history. In wars, tribes would go and destroy other tribes and villages and burn them down. The only thing that they would keep would be the women and children. Men would be put into slavery. Young boys would either be recruited into legions. Any number of things would happen, but the truth of the matter is, women have always been protected and preserved throughout history. They are always a protected sex. That doesn't mean that you should put them up on a pedestal and worship them, and the whole sugar and spice and all things nice narrative needs to die. Treat all guns as loaded. It's always fun to play with a loaded gun. I'd rather play with a loaded gun than one with blanks or one that's unloaded. Of course, you do it safely and in a range, and you've been properly trained and you've got the licenses and you know what the hell you're doing. It's kind of the same thing with women, but there's no women's safety course. There's firearm safety courses, but there's no women's safety courses. Guys will march into marriage and wife up the first girl that touches their pee-pee, but they don't have a full understanding and comprehension of what they're getting into, what family law entails, and what the potential outcomes can be, and how detrimental they can be to their financial health, wealth, and even their own personal mindset. So again, a lot of the stuff I talk about in multiple videos on my channel and the Unplugged Alpha podcast and the Ladies Night podcast, you can go check those out. They're linked in the description below. All right, the second timeless truth here, which again is true for thousands of years into the past and will be true well into the future, is all women have skeletons in their closet. Some women have graveyards. Now, this is actually a little soundbite from a stand-up comedy back in the 80s. I can't remember if it was Eddie Murphy Delirious or Rob, but I'm pretty sure it's Eddie Murphy. But he was telling a story, and the older I get, the more this becomes true. When you're a young teenager watching a stand-up comedy like this and you're laughing and you're falling off the couch and you're crying so hard because it's so funny, you don't actually comprehend the gravity of that statement. All women have skeletons in their closet. Some women have graveyards. Now, the only time it's not true, when they're young, when they haven't been promiscuous, when they haven't been the village bicycle, they haven't dated, they haven't got any notches under their belt. That's the only time that that's really not true. The thing being, though, is because with women, their value is based on their purity, and they inherently know this. They don't want their value to be based on their purity. They don't want their value to be based on their beauty. You'll see this a lot of the times when I'm doing podcasts on Ladies Night. Women will try to convince me and my co-host Moff that they should be admired for their business acumen, for their degrees framed in mahogany on the wall. They should be admired for their home and the IKEA furniture they have, and their dog collection, all that sort of stuff. And it's just not true. There's no man in history that's ever looked at a woman's degree framed in mahogany and been like, oh, look at that degree, that's a hot degree framed in mahogany. Like, look at the way that thing walks away and it sort of shakes away. We don't do that. We don't ultimately care that much at the end of the day. So what ends up happening is as women sort of navigate, they try to suppress and hide their activity out there with guys because they inherently know that that activity isn't good for them and ends up lowering their value on the sexual marketplace. So what ends up happening is they start to accumulate skeletons in the closet, okay? Skeletons could be something simple as they racked up 10 notches and they tell you it's only 4. Skeletons could be something like they had a threesome in Europe when they were traveling with their friends and cousins and stuff like that, and they deny it, but it did happen. An entire graveyard, well, you can add all of those up and multiply it by about 5 or 10 is entirely possible. They do exist. So you have to understand, every single chick that you deal with that's an adult that has been with a guy or guys in the past, they are going to deceive you and they're not going to tell you the entire story. They all have skeletons in the closet and some have an entire graveyard. Understand that. All right, let's deal with number 3. This is a line that annoys me to no end. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You see this all the time. Just the other day, I had one of these podcast clips show up in my Twitter timeline, now X, whatever the hell it is you want to call it. And the podcast clip is some attractive girl wearing almost nothing with giant, she's got really bad arthritis, you know what I'm saying? So she's that kind of gal, and she's sitting there in the microphone talking to the host, and she's like, I want to have 4 husbands or 3 husbands or something like that. And the host is like, oh, okay, tell me more. Talk to the camera and tell me your batshit crazy story, basically. So she proceeds to sing like a canary. Well, you know, if guys can do it, then gals can do it too. And, you know, I want to have one guy that's going to treat me really well, and I want one guy that's going to love me, and I want one guy that's going to provide for me financially, and I want one guy that's going to be my husband that's also going to rearrange my insides in the bedroom, basically, you know, some version of that. And it's like, that doesn't work. What's good for the goose is not always good for the gander. Men and women are not the same. They like to use this narrative because men are promiscuous. They generally have a much more promiscuous past than women, not always, but generally, especially if they're attractive and they're high net worth and they're what's called a high value man, they generally exercise options. And women know this, and they know that they've been with these guys in the past. They call them fuck boys or whatever, you know, narrative it is that they want to use to describe the guy that they were unable to lock down because he had options. And they understand that guys exercise these options and they want to replicate it. It's like, well, you know, if guys can have multiple wives, like if they're polygynous and they can have a whole bunch of wives, why can't women do it? If Muslim men can have 4 wives, why can't women do it? And it's like, it doesn't work that way, sweetheart. It doesn't. Men and women have totally different sexual strategies. They're not something that we are conscious of, you know, if I'm being honest. It's not like we're like, oh, my strategy is to do this, that, and you don't even fucking know. At the end of the day, women don't even understand or know what their sexual strategy is, and very few guys understand or know what their sexual strategy is. It's almost like you're dead fish going downstream. You just have to kind of go with the flow, and that's how most guys operate. Very few guys unplug and understand the reality of the world and act on what it is that they are and what they're attuned to and what they want to be. At no time in history did women ever run harems on a frequent basis. But if you go through historical records, even if you go through the Guinness Book of World Records, there's a record of Ishmael the Bloodthirsty. I've talked about this before. He had several wives, many consorts and concubines. He would turn men into eunuchs to guard his concubines. He had hundreds of these women that he had at his beck and call at any given time. And he had several hundred, if I'm not mistaken, over 1,000 children. And he was still popping out kids. Even after his death, there was still a child or 2 that were born after he died. This is what a harem is. A man can have multiple children in one single year, could have dozens, hundreds even, if there's enough willing women to participate in taking on his seed, but a woman can only have 1 child a year. So there are vast differences between men and women. So what's good for the goose isn't always good for the gander, but women will tell themselves this lie, they'll tell their friends this lie. It's weird, you know, today it's rampant. There's women that are, I mean, part of the reason why we have women climbing the corporate ladder and are very accomplished and have degrees in their own homes, and they have their Teslas and their furniture and their multiple degrees framed in mahogany on the wall and that sort of stuff. Part of the reason why that all exists today is because they are, you know, as a function of competition, trying to be like men. which is fine. You know, if that's what they want to do, they want to do. But they don't understand that that's not what attracts men to them. You see this all the time. Like, I've even had this on a couple of my podcasts where I've got gals on the panel, and they're like, you know, so what makes you attractive? Or why would a guy want to pick you? And they tell you some story about, well, you know, my Tesla's paid for, and I have a great job. It pays $186,000 a year. I've got a degree in this, and I've got a degree in this, and I've got a degree in that. And you should see my house is decorated very nicely, and blah, 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 sort of thing. And it's like, they're basically describing what makes a man attractive. And men aren't attracted to success, they're attracted to beauty. Again, what's good for the goose is not always good for the gander. Let's go to number 4. Women are the byproduct, not the goal. Chase excellence, not women. Again, true 100, 1,000 years ago, still true today, and will be true 100 years well into the future. This is something that is not going to change. It is always going to exist. It is always going to be a feature of culture and society. It is what it is. Guys, women should not be the focus. They should not be the plot. They should not be what you're about. Attractive women, or a woman, depending on what your strategy might be, should be the byproduct of you being on a grind and on your focus and on your purpose. It should not be the purpose. A hot woman or a wife or a girlfriend, a lot of guys make it their purpose. It's like their entire life is get the girl. And this is a very, very bad strategy. It doesn't usually end well for these guys. And it often ends in heartbreak. And these are the same guys that end up going through the divorce grinder, getting divorce rate, being alienated from their kids, and watching their wealth transfer from them to their ex-wife. You cannot put women on a pedestal. You cannot chase them. They're going to tell you to chase them. A lot of women out there will dispense advice to guys, and I'll be honest with you, I've seen the advice they're given, it sucks. If you want to catch a fish, you ask a fisherman how to catch a fish. You don't ask the fish how to catch the fish. This is the equivalent of women giving advice on dating and how to find women or how to get women interested in you. Don't do that. Pay very, very close attention to what I talk, what's in my book, and my other videos, and in my podcast. Again, chase excellence, not women. You go out there and you accomplish something with your life. You have a purpose. You're putting a dent in the universe. Doesn't matter if it's tiny or if it's big. Doesn't matter if you're doing something of small significance or you're Jeff Bezos and you've created Amazon. You're one of the wealthiest people in the world. Doesn't matter. You have to have some kind of a purpose, some kind of a grind. See, women want guys with a sparkle in their eye, but they don't want to be the sparkle. They want the guy to have something going on in their life. They want the guy to be on some kind of a grind. And by the way, women will test you and they'll try to say, oh, you know, you work too many hours, or why you're working so many hours. We don't need you. Like, why don't you spend more time with me? Da, 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 da. It's like, you know, you have to be like, babe, I love you. But here's the thing. I've got something to do here. Like, I've got a project, I've got a grind, I've got a purpose, I've got a level, I've got a promotion. It doesn't matter what it happens to be. I've got a franchise I want to open. I want to increase my sales, you know, this year by 50%. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm busy on my purpose. I'm not going to sit there on the couch to hold hands and watch Netflix series all weekend long and not accomplish what I need to do. If you're accomplished and you've done it and you want to take a break and put your feet up a little bit, I understand. But chasing excellence should always come before women. Again, chase excellence, not women. Have a purpose, have a grind, have something going on in your life. And again, that sparkle in your eye needs to be something else that's not her. And she knows it, and that's what she wants as well too. All right, let's do number 5. And it's quite simply, all women are hypergamous. You might have heard this term before. I've mentioned it several times. All that means, and this is true, again, 2,000 years ago, throughout history, you know, for being fully honest, for all these things too, women have always been hypergamous. It is a feature of their sexual strategy, and it is a requirement of them to be hypergamous to get what they want out of life, because if they weren't, it would probably spell certain doom or death for them, or could have spelled doom or death for them and their kids had they chosen unwisely. You need to understand that what women want is a guy that is a giant. They want to look up to a guy that's a winner. They want to look at a guy that can solve problems. They want to be with a man that just gets it. They don't want to be some guy that's like, oh, I got a flat tire. What do I do? Do we call your dad or do we call CAA? They want a guy that knows how to change a freaking flat tire. They don't want to have to explain it to him, and they sure as fuck don't want to have to change the tire for them. I had this gal on a ladies' night once, and she told me this story about how she was so disgusted and despised this guy because he got a flat tire, she was with him, and he didn't know how to change it, and because she was a daddy's girl, and daddy showed her how to do something like change a flat tire, she knew how to remedy that problem. She never saw that guy again because she had to go and, you know, man up and do the work for this nerd. It's incredibly important that women have a guy that they can look up to. You need to be that guy. You need to understand that you have to go out there and do the work. Like I say, chase excellence, not women. Understand all of these features about female nature. They're not bugs. They're features that ensure survival. And these features of their behavior, you have to understand, are there. They exist so that she can ensure that her lineage, that her DNA, that her babies are going to, you know, go off into the future and survive, right? You and I sitting here right now only exist because of our ancestors and the choices that they made. We're only here because of that. There's lots and lots of men and women out there, mostly guys, you know, for being honest, that never pass on their seed, that never leave a legacy behind because they weren't chosen. And if you want to be chosen, and here's a key thing, by the way, men compete and women choose. Understand that. I read this post the other day, I think it was Reddit, somebody sent it to me, and this guy was bitching and complaining about dating sucks. I hate that you have to be so performative. Why do I have to compete? You know, there's other guys out there that are richer, they drive, you know, nicer cars than me, you know, all this sort of stuff. And I hate that I have to compete. Why can't women just love me for who I am? And that's like getting in a frickin' Prius and being like, why doesn't it do the quarter mile in 10 seconds flat? They just aren't built that way. Same thing with women. They aren't gonna love you for just who you are. Your mom might. Even then there's some reservations, but your mom might. Your dog will. You want a female that'll love you unconditionally? Get a female dog. She'll always be there by your side, never judge you, and always be happy to see you when you come home. But women aren't like that. Women are hypergamous. They have to get up in the morning and look at you and be like, this guy is amazing. I am so blessed to have him in my life, and I have gratitude for it. I mean, that's not what they're ever gonna say on a long-term basis, if you and I are being honest, but truthfully, you know, when genuine burning desire, when that box is ticked off and they're like that from the early stages, from early on, that's what you want. That's a good sign. You want to ensure that you tick off her hypergamous hindbrain, that she is placated, that she is satisfied with that. You understand? All right. Those are the 5 things. Leave a comment below, pinned in the top one. There's a bunch of useful links to my other channels, my podcast, my book, my supplements. Go check them out. Visit my website. Leave a comment below, guys. Let me know what you think of this video. If you want more like this, I can make them. See you guys later. Peace out.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love